Yo, what is up, everybody? Teresco back again with another chapter from the story titled 50 Days After the Apocalypse, written by Rupert Rollinson. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author, like, comment, and subscribe. Chapter 3. Time trickled by at a snail's pace, but slowly the light of dawn began to filter through the boards covering the broken windows. Checking the digital watch, Amy rose to her feet, stretching as she did in an attempt to remove the stiffness from her limbs. Looking down at herself in the new light of the day, the girl saw her blood-covered clothes, momentarily distracted by the way the coating would crack as she moved. Amy thought back on the events of yesterday after the pair had left their house. John had dragged the girl from one house to another, teaching her how to board up doors and windows, as well as how to efficiently search a house for supplies. But the main thing the girl had learned yesterday was how to fight. The infected were everywhere, clogging up the streets and waiting to ambush them in every house. In just one day, Amy had almost died over half a dozen times, and she was sure it would have been a lot more if not for her quiet companion. Amy's attention drifted over to her companion. Only John's head protruded from his sleeping bag as it rested on a rolled up jumper that acted as a pillow. Filled with envy at the man's restful sleep, Amy looked down at the watch. 6:50. 10 minutes before she was supposed to wake him. After another jealous look at the man, and Amy decided he had enough sleep. Stealthily moving over to John, the girl reached to his side without waking him. While she was sure she would have been killed without him, there was still a part of her that felt the man could have been a little more compassionate. In fact, any compassion would have been nice. Deciding to get a little bit of revenge on her companion, Amy brought her foot back and gave John a light but sharp kick inside. John grunted as he woke up, hands struggling to find the zipper on his sleeping bag, his expression a mixture of anger and shock. If it weren't for the threat of attack by the infected, Amy would have burst out laughing. And after a few good seconds, the man came to his senses. Looking at Amy questioningly, he finally freed himself from the bag. "Time to get up," Amy said in the sweetest voice she could muster, before moving over to one of the upturned chairs and righting it. As she sat down, the girl made sure that her bat was in arm's reach and her chair was pointing in the direction of the door. Shortly after, John followed her, dragging over his rucksack as he mirrored Amy's actions. Rooting through the pack, John pulled out 2 cans of beans, which he quickly cut the lids off with one of his knives. Momentarily confused, Amy looked around for a form of heating the contents before she realized what was about to happen. "You've got to be kidding," he exclaimed in a deadpan voice as John slid one of the freezing cold cans over to her. The man merely smiled at her as he dug out a spork and began to dig through his can. Amy sat there for a few seconds before giving in and asking, "Don't I get one?" John looked at her, a gleam in his eye and a sadistic smile on his face as he said, in a sickly sweet voice, "Sorry, I only packed one." Amy had to restrain herself from kicking him again as she looked down at the congealed contents of the can. Honestly, it looked like sick, and it didn't smell much better, but a sudden grumble from her stomach settled things for her. Slowly lifting the can to her lips, Amy poured a quarter of it out towards her mouth. Maybe half of the falling beans actually landed in her mouth. The rest fell onto her t-shirt and legs, adding another color to the blood-stained clothing. Amy gagged at the horrible taste of the food as she struggled to swallow. Amy tried 2 more times to eat from the can before John mercifully handed her another spork. They ate in uncomfortable silence. Amy's mind was filled with questions, but she could not ask them. As they finished their respective cans, John set about packing all the items they had left spread around the room. With that finished, he handed Amy her pack before slinging his own onto his shoulders, picking up a hockey stick. As the two approached the door, they stood silent for a moment, longing to see if they could hear any affected. Satisfied for their momentary safety, the two moved their barricade out of the way and silently stole out of the house and into the streets. The carnage of the previous day was diminished, but still evidence of it could be seen anywhere you looked. Most noticeable of these reminders were the infected that swarmed the streets, in possibly even more numbers than before. Shambling around, no distinct direction, creatures made traveling through the main roads impossible, and instead the companions struck to alleys, gardens. The tension was incredible. Knowing that with every step they risked their lives was as thrilling as it was terrifying. But possibly the most impossible thing Amy saw that day was John. The man thrived in this new world. As the hours passed, Amy's concentration began to waver, but John only became more impressive, leading the two through the town with ease, skirting large groups of infected, distracting others that impeded her route. Amy felt her respect for the man increased with every step he took. This would not last. It was long past midday, and the pair had begun to look for a safe place to make camp for the night. Then they heard it. The screaming and yells for help. Amy immediately made after them, believing her companion would follow her. It was human, after all, to want to help those in need, wasn't it? Amy raced through the streets, thankful that the areas infected seemed to be occupied somewhere else. She soon found them. The cries were coming from the doorway to the 2-story detached house. A young girl was crying in front of the open door, while a middle-aged man was fending off a group of 8 infected with a piece of plywood. Amy made a move towards the scuffle, only for John to grab her by the arm and hold her back. "What are you doing? We need to go help them." "Just wait." Amy was forced to watch as the two of the infected broke past the man and latched on to the screaming girl. Amy averted her gaze, but there was a sickening squelch, and then the screaming stopped. The child was gutted in seconds. The man lets loose a cry of loss as he turned around, smashed the plywood over the back of the first infected's head before swinging it in an upward arc, slamming into the second's chin. The creature wheeled back, but before the man could finish it like he did the first one of the faster infected lurched towards the man, burying its teeth into its shoulder. John quickly lets Amy go and pressed a button on his watch. Then he calmly walked past his companion and asking, "Shall we save him then?" As if he was asking for her to go for a walk. But Amy brushed off her worry. Instead, she was focusing on the infected as she charged in to the back of them. The first one didn't see her coming and was an easy kill. The second one turned to her, raising an arm to swing at her, but Amy blocked it with her bat. Again, Amy was forced to marvel at the strength of the infected as the bat was almost driven from her hands. Almost. Amy used the block to push forwards and throw the monster off balance. Before it could recover, Amy brained it. Using the brief respite Kill offered her, Amy looked around to see John had killed 3 of the infected, leaving only the one that had killed the girl and the one that had bitten the man. The 2 creatures fully concentrated on their new prey, allowing the man to feebly crawl over to the corpse of his daughter. The infected that had killed the girl charged forwards at John, who quickly sidestepped using the hockey stick to trip the monster, knocking it to the floor. Before it could get up, John raised his weapon and slammed it straight through the back of the creature's skull, killing it. Undaunted, the other infected charged at the 2 of them. John spun on his heel, swinging his hockey stick into the thing's stomach, forcing it to double over, allowing Amy to rush forwards, bat raised, finishing it with one quick strike. Amy breathed a sigh of relief as she stood there, panting. Recovering her composure, she smiled kindly at the man, cowering over the bleeding girl's body. Silently, John strode over to him. "Come with us." "Where?" "Just into the house behind you." Amy mirrored his actions, startled to see that already more infected were emerging from the surrounding houses, probably drawn by the conflict. What about my daughter? You can save her, can't you?" Before Amy could try and comfort the father over his loss, John spoke. "Move over and let me see her." The kindness in his voice immediately had Amy on edge, and she looked at her companion, not understanding his actions. The man quickly stood up and moved away from the girl's body, and Amy saw John's hand tighten on the handle of his hockey stick, and she realized too late what was about to happen. Before the two could react, John raised his hockey stick and slammed down on top of the dead girl's head. The father yelled in anger and made to grab John, only for the man in question to drop his hockey stick and punch the father in the face. Before the elder man could recover, John slipped behind them, grabbed the man around his neck, dragging him inside the house. Amy stood there, stunned for a second, before quickly picking up John's discarded weapon, following the two. The man fell into what appeared to be a living room, momentarily breaking them apart. John flung his backpack off and grabbed one of the knives attached to the outside of it as he scrambled to his feet. In his anger, the father charged forward, blindly unafraid, only to be stabbed just below his bitten shoulder. Yelling in pain, the man could do nothing as John forced the knife tip out of the other side of the man's body. The father swung wildly at John's face with the other hand, but was dodged, and John pushed the man backwards to the wall. John ran forward, grabbing the knife handle again as he slammed all of his weight behind it, stabbing the tip to the wall. And John gave the handle a savage twist, jamming the knife into the wall, pinning the man in place. The father made to use the other hand to pull the blade, but John grabbed it, forcing it away. Amy, give me the other knives," he called out to the woman who stood in the doorway. Amy hesitated unwillingly to join in whatever her partner was doing. Now!" John shouted at her as he struggled with the man. Dropping the two weapons, Amy ran over to the discarded backpack, pulling out all three of the knives before handing them over. Amy watched as John took each one of them and stabbed the man in the same place on his other arm and one through each of his legs, just above the feet, giving each another twist to hold them there. Finally satisfied with his grim work, John moved away, riding one of the upturned chairs or taking a seat facing the man. Amy, go make sure the house is safe. Normally, Amy would have yelled at John not to order her around, but right now, he was all too happy to get the hell out of that room. The next 20 minutes, the girl searched the empty house for infected, as well as barricading the outer doors and covering the windows. With nothing left to do, Amy grudgingly returned to find the man still vainly struggling to escape the knives. Silently, she strode in, grabbing a stool. She walked over to a corner. As she sat down, the man finally stopped struggling, realizing it was impossible to escape. His shoulders sank and his head dropped. After a while, the man spoke. "You said you would save her, you bastard." "I did. If I hadn't done that, you would have had something far worse than death waiting for her." "When I get out of here, I'm gonna throttle you until I see the life leave your eyes." I'm afraid that you'll only get out of here after you've died." "You're going to kill me, then just hurry up and do it. Look, I'm not gonna kill you. You're a dead man walking. Then Amy perked up at that, and she just said, John, can I talk to you for a minute? What did you mean about the bite? Look, bites are how the disease spread. Casting a glance at the pinned man, clearly eager to return his observation, but Amy wasn't done with John yet. So why have you trapped that man? An experiment, really. Amy stood to wait for John to elaborate, but he looked away, not wanting to meet Amy's eyes, as he said, Look, I'm timing how long it takes for a bite to take over. That's stupid. I mean, you would have had to have been timing him immediately after he was, no? She didn't finish her sentence, and right then, Amy realized what had happened. Unable to stop herself, Amy spoke her thoughts. You waited for him to be bitten. You sacrificed both him and the girl just for your experiment? Yeah, I mean, why waste the perfect chance? The first slap echoed throughout the empty household. The second became more of a thud as Amy clenched her hand to a fist. John's head flew back and he staggered slightly before hitting the corridor wall. You sentenced them to death for your own gain. We could have saved them. You didn't even feel sorry, do you? Aren't you human? Amy, humanity is dead. All that is left are survivors and infected. In this new world, you looked after yourself and only yourself. Do you understand me? Amy looked at John. He had a red handprint on his left cheek, while his lip was cut from the punch. His face and body were covered in upcoming bruises from his fight with the man. Slowly, the girl asked one last question. Then why did you save me? In your new world, what possible reason was there to save me? You can't survive alone in this world. You need to sleep and need someone to watch your pack. Why did you save me? You were the first person I saw. John's answer was full of regret, but it wasn't registered. Amy forcefully pulled her arm out of John's grip before walking back into the living room, sitting on her stool, looking at the captured man. John followed a few seconds after her and was tactful enough to pull his seat over to the opposite corner. The man didn't seem to register the two coming back in, or if he did, he didn't do anything about it. 20 minutes of silence passed as the man started to froth at the mouth. Half an hour later, the man slumped before he looked up. His eyes were now misted over, and he had the expression of an animal wild. There was no recognizable trait of humanity left in him, and Amy and John both stood as Amy reached for her cricket bat. What are you doing? I'm killing it. Do you not understand that we have a trapped infected here? There are still so many other things we can learn from it, like, not this one. You will not do anything to this poor man as long as I'm here. Tell me, why would you do this for one man you don't even know? Amy paused for a second before she answered, knowing what she said could decide if they lived or died. Because while I'm still alive, humanity lives on. The two stood motionless for a full minute while the infected grunted, growled behind them. Finally, John lowered his hockey stick. Alright, fine. Kill this one. There will be other chances, and when they come, I will kill you if you get in my way again. Both of them knew he meant it. John retrieved his backpack as he moved past the girl and made his way upstairs, shouting as he went. Look, we're staying here for the night, so come and find me when it gets dark. Oh, and clean the knives up when you're done with that thing. Amy let out a breath she had been holding as she turned back to the infected, raised her bat above her head. The infected looked at her with its vacant, angry stare. No comprehension, no kindness. I'm sorry, Amy whispered as she slammed her bat down on the creature's head.